What is happening, everybody? I hope you're all well, and welcome back to Dragon Age 2 Codex. Now, as always, this is not going to be a main episode of the Let's Play. This is going to be a lore read and discussion episode of the Let's Play. If that's not something you're interested in, then go ahead and click away now. If that is something you're interested in, then let's jump into the codexes we got last episode before we set off into the new one proper. So, Kirkwall, the Elven Alienage. Lowtown is home to a squalid Elven alienage. Here, like in most Thedas alienages, elves are packed into tiny rundown apartments and effectively segregated from the human population. Kirkwall's alienage is even more dilapidated than the rest of Lowtown, but the elves go to great lengths, keeping the place looking bright and festive. The Venedal, Tree of the People, standing in the middle of the alienage, is a symbol for elven pride and shared cultural identity, and it is lovingly cared for. It's difficult to say if the elves would continue confining themselves to the alienage if they were given the chance to mingle. They may not admit it, but some feel that living among their kind is far better than living with humans, no matter how terrible alienage life may be. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive. Which is funny that Kirkwall's alienage has this codex, because the one in Kirkwall is actually way more open than it is in other places. Maybe it's because it's Lowtown, so it's already like a slum, and Lowtown itself is cordoned off, so maybe that's why the alienage isn't. But in all the other games, whenever you run into an alienage, there's big fences, they're not allowed to come and go as they please. I mean, the one at Denerim is guarded by a giant makeshift fence, a bridge, a drawbridge, and then a giant portcullis, for reference. So Kirkwall's alienage is quite open. There's not even a door. They can just roll out up into the rest of Lowtown, but maybe that's why, because Lowtown is the slum, not just the alienage. Still interesting to think about, though. Kirkwall, Darktown. Darktown was once a mine controlled by the Tevinter Imperium. Once exhausted, the mine shafts were extended under the city to dispose of sewage from Kirkwall's overcrowded population of slaves. Unsurprisingly, the tunnels became a refuge for those fleeing captivity. A similar trend continues today. The Undercity, as some call it, is home to the diseased, the insane, the criminals, and even the dead. Unwanted corpses are often discarded here by murderers and lazy undertakers. Darktown slums make Lowtown look pleasant in comparison. The foul miasma known as choke damp clogs and swells in every corner of the Darktown, creating a poisonous mist. Its sewers are a dangerous place. The walls are damp, slick, and coated with phosphorescent lichen. The sewer is a maze, and one foolish enough to enter is not likely to be heard from again. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive. So, Darktown, or the Undercity as they call it, is actually quite like Blighttown from Dark Souls. That's what that reminds me of. You have the fog, the maze-like structure, disease, the abandoned corpses that apparently even the Undertakers, I guess if you're not of noble birth, they just say fuck it and toss you in the sewers. So, it's a pretty bad place. There's some bad things going on in Kirkwall. You got abandoned corpses all over the place. You got an old slave nation. So I imagine the veil and the fade is very thin in Kirkwall given its history, which will be important later. So it's interesting to have all this context as we go forward. Kirkwall, Lowtown. Lowtown sits in a massive cauldron-shaped pit that was once Kirkwall's first quarry. The district was constructed by slaves who carved the city and its harbor out of the rock. Today, Lowtown is a labyrinth of shantytowns, corridors, and hexagonal courtyards, hexes in the local parlance. Lowtown's poorest live in caves hewn out of the cliff face. The district is shoddily built and bears scars caused by collapsing walls. Foundry smoke smothers the area. Only a cold winter storm clears the air, but the icy wind howling over the mouths of old mine shafts hardly counts as relief. Occasionally, these Darktown shafts erupt with gouts of foul air known as choke damp. It's not uncommon to find whole slums silently suffocated, frozen in the midst of everyday activity. The walls surrounding Lowtown are highest by the harbor. Its busiest streets leads up to Hightown, where the wealthiest Kirkwallers perch. When one stands in Lowtown, all one sees, other than the rocky walls, is Hightown. It glitters overhead, always in sight, yet always beyond reach. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive. And I imagine the design of this is very intentional, right? I'm sure the Tevinter slavers wanted the slaves to look up at their overlords and know that they would never get there. It's all designed to make you feel hopeless. I mean, shit, even the homes, like Gamlen's house, you notice how there's like rock and mud and shit in there? It's because it's all literally carved out from a rock face. So they are quite literally sleeping in caves that they just built walls around. But I imagine that's all very deliberate. And it's cool that they kind of double down on these features inside the Codex. It's a pretty nice touch. Rivain. Nowhere in my travels, not in the heart of the Imperium, nor the streets of Orzammar, have I felt so much an outsider as in Rivain. The chant of light never truly reached the ears of these people. The years they spent under the thumb of the Qunari left most of the country zealous followers of the Qun. But resistance to the chant goes deeper than the Qunari War. The Rivaini refuse to be parted from their seers, wise women who are in fact hedge mages, communicating with spirits and actually allowing themselves to become possessed. The chantry prohibition against such magical practices violates millennia of local tradition. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genetive, and I'm sure the Qunari, based on how they see mages and spirits, are absolutely fucking thrilled by that. The whole hedge mage thing. I'm actually surprised the Qunari allowed them to keep that tradition. I guess that says something about the Qunari, right? Especially when you understand that Rivain is the place they pulled back, because the innocent people they were trying to convert were being slaughtered. And I guess for anybody who knows what happens in Dragon Age Veilguard, keep that in mind, that the Qunari pulled back and surrendered territory in a war to keep their converts alive. And then those same people eventually end up serving the Blight in Veilguard. Doesn't make much sense. But I've already ranted plenty about the Qunari in the Veilguard, so. The Tevinter Imperium. For good or ill, the Imperium has put its stamp on Thedas forever. The old Imperial Highway is still in use across most of Thedas. The ruins of Tevinter fortresses and centers of magical study still litter our landscape, long after the glory of the Imperium dimmed. But the influence of that ancient empire goes deeper than this. Without Tevinter, there would have been no Blights, no Andraste, no Chantry. Every aspect of our world would be altered. The might and majesty of the Imperium may have faded, but it still makes its presence known, even in the most distant corners of Thedas. Every child has been brought up on stories of Tevinter as it is now, a decadent nation, ruled by the Archon and his court of magisters, great, and no doubt corrupt, mage lords. Their chantry a mockery of our own, their black divine, a man chosen from the ranks of the Minrathous circle of magi, the Maker's most hallowed law. Magic exists to serve man, and never to rule over him, perverted. Mages in the Imperium say their most sacred duty is to serve man, and they serve best by wielding political power. And the worst, that which blessed Andraste must weep to see, all of it is built on a foundation of slavery. While most nations forbid the buying and selling of slaves within their own borders, nearly everyone ships her people to the Imperium for sale, skirting the prohibitions against such atrocities and feeding the Imperium's endless hunger for bodies, to fight the Qunari, to work the mines and quarries, to build the palaces of the magisters, to sweep the crumbling streets and turn the middens and serve at the whim of their mage overseers. From Black City, Black Divine, a study of the Tevinter Imperium by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. And of course, that is another great little notch of how we should view people from the Imperium, right? Even the nations that have outlawed slavery, you're still always going to get scumbags, obviously, that ship and port their people there. So Tevinter is actually not just responsible for the slave trade in Tevinter. It's also responsible for the slave trade in all of Thedas, because it's the only place in Thedas where it's legal to sell. So, I do not like the Tevinter Imperium, and I do not like the people of the Tevinter Imperium. We have a couple more things in, well, actually, a lot of things. Well, thank God I brought a coffee, right? Alrighty. History of Kirkwall, Chapter 1. It's difficult for many to comprehend today, but there was a time when Kirkwall was believed to be the very edge of the world. It was Emirius then, named after its founder, Magister Emirius Craven, and it was but one outpost on the very fringe of the Tevinter Imperium. There the Magister's serfs worked the quarries for the jetstone needed for the mighty temples of Minrathous. After a slave rebellion nearly burned the temple to the ground in the great city, it was determined that a center for the slave trade would need to be established well away from the more civilized parts of the Imperium. though this account may be exaggerated, since the notorious Archon Venarius Esau narrowly escaped assassination at the hands of an Elven slave at the time. Too bad he missed. Because the new slave outpost would become wealthy beyond imagining, competition among prospects reportedly took over 20 years to resolve, resulting in great bloodshed in the frontier, well away from the Archon's eyes. Magister took arms against Magister, mostly in the form of small armies of serfs and mercenaries. Over half the slaves in existence allegedly died in these battles before Emirius was finally chosen, thanks to the marriage of Craven's son to the Archon's daughter. Within a mere decade, the mighty fortress was erected on the cliffs where Kirkwall now stands. Over 1 million slaves passed through its gates before the Imperium eventually fell, an unimaginable number by today's standards. The Craven family itself became patrons of the next 3 Archons and was one of the driving forces behind the extension of the Imperial Highway into the Ferelden Valley, a move that would cost them considerable political influence after the resistance of the Alamari tribes. During its height, Emirius was a jewel to the rival, the mightiest of the imperial cities and the greatest center of civilization outside Tevinter. From Kirkwall, the City of Chains, by Brother Genitive, 924 Dragon. History of Kirkwall, Chapter 2. As the Imperium's borders slowly receded after the devastation of the First Blight and the subsequent barbarian invasion, many outposts in the area, known today as the Free Marchers, were cut off from centers of power. Numerous warlords tried consolidating the region into a single kingdom, but resistance prevailed. Emirius held out for almost a century until it fell to a slave revolt in 25 Ancient. It was not the first such revolt Emirius suffered, but it was the last. It started when an Alamari slave named Radun began earning popularity and power by pushing for better conditions. Radun's growing influence prevented the Magisters from touching him, but eventually they had him poisoned. Furious, a group of Radun's supporters stormed the gallows and were massacred, and so began a bloody year-long rebellion. The city burned, and wealthy Hightown was sacked. The Magisters hung before cheering crowds. Emirius assumed the new name of Kirkwall, Kirk meaning black, after its jetstone cliffs. The new city plunged into anarchy for over a decade, and its defenses fell into ruin. Kirkwall has been conquered many times since, the city's own independence suffering since the freeing of its slaves. From Kirkwall, the City of Chains, by Brother Genitive, 924 Dragon. I especially like the part about them being before crowds. It seems like justice to me that the slaves got to string up their overlords. History of Kirkwall, Chapter 4. The Threnhold family assumed its foreboding control of the city at the very onset of the Dragon Age, less than a week after Maric Therin retook the Ferelden throne from Orlais. Since this was followed by a civil war in Antiva, the much maligned Three Queens era, and a coup in the Tevinter Imperium, many thought that the Dragon Age would bring devastating change. Perhaps this was a hasty estimate, but it was true for Kirkwall. Viscount Chivalry Threnhold was a vicious thug who took power through a campaign of intimidation, and his son Perrin, who succeeded him in 914 Dragon, was even worse. Taxes were crippling, and Perrin Threnhold used the ancient chains extending from the Twins, standing at Kirkwall's harbour, unused since the new Exalted Marchers, to block sea traffic and charge exorbitant fees from Orlesian ships. The Empire threatened invasion following the closure of the Waking Sea Passage, and for the first time, the Chantry used the Templars to pressure the Viscount. Until that point, the Templars had done nothing to counter the Threnholds, even though, as the largest armed force in Kirkwall, they could have. Knight Commander Gullion's only written comment was in a letter to Divine Beatrix III. It is not our place to interfere in political affairs. We are here to safeguard the city against magic, not against itself. The Divine, as a friend to the Emperor, clearly had other ideas. In response, Viscount Perrin hired a mercenary army, forcing a showdown with the Templars. They stormed the gallows and hung Knight Commander Gillian, igniting a series of battles that ended with Perrin's arrest and the last of his family's rule. The Templars were hailed as heroes, and even though they wished to remain out of Kirkwall's affairs, it was now forced upon them. Knight Commander Meredith appointed Lord Marlowe Dumas as the new Viscount in 921 Dragon, and she has remained influential in the city's rule ever since. From Kirkwall, the City of Chains, by Brother Genitive, 924 Dragon. Now, this is really interesting to learn about because this actually shows something quite interesting about Knight Commander Meredith's origin too. Her predecessor was hung dead over politics they were not supposed to get involved in and didn't want to. This guy didn't want to get involved in the politics. He was dragged into it by the Divine and he was killed and hung for it. And then the Templars had to step in and save the city. And now she's been doing that ever since. So when that city guard at Kirkwall's gates was talking about how they don't answer to Knight Commander Meredith, but they do, this is where that began and this is why that began. So it's actually really interesting to understand a little more of Meredith's character. You have to understand where she comes from. And this kind of scratches that itch too. The Amell Family. It's truly sad what happened to the Amells, isn't it? I still remember grandmother talking about the balls that Lord Aristide used to hold at their estate in the Antivan violin, players and dancers from Asfana. No expense was spared, and no one would dare miss it, lest someone think they weren't worthy of an invitation. And then poor Revka had the child. Magical talent, running in one of Kirkwall's most prominent families. The Templars had considered Lord Aristide to be Viscount after Threnhold's arrest. Can you imagine the scandal had he been chosen? They whisked the child away to the Circle, and the Amells simply had no luck after that. Leandra ran off with a Ferelden mage, and then Damien was accused of smuggling. Poor Lord Forsten almost bankrupted his family trying to get the charges dropped, but I hear Viscount Marlowe simply wanted the Amells out of the picture, and it worked too, didn't it? By the time Lord Forsten got sick, there was only young Gamlin left, and a mountain of debt. I spoke to Dulce just the other day, and apparently Gamlin is now living in some Lowtown shack. Sounds like the sort of character you'd cross a street to avoid. And let's not even talk about the estate. Mother says we should remember the Amells, because that sort of thing could happen to any of us. You know the old saying, a marcher's fortune rises and falls with the tide? If you ask me, this is just another misfortune that magic brings to honest folk. Andraste helped that poor family, whatever lies in store for them. Excerpt from a letter written by Lady Amelia de Montfort. Montfort is a name from Inquisition, I believe. An interesting tie-in. The City Elves. When the Holy Exalted March of the Dales resulted in the dissolution of the Elven Kingdom, leaving a great many elves homeless once again, the Divine Renata I declared that all lands loyal to the Chantry must give the elves refuge within their own walls. Considering the atrocities committed by the elves at Red Crossing, this was a great testament to the Chantry's charity. There was one condition, however. The elves were to lay aside their pagan gods and live under the rule of the Chantry. Some of the elves refused our goodwill. They banded together to form the Wandering Dalish Elves, keeping their old elven ways and their hatred of humans alive. To this day, Dalish elves still terrorize those of us who stray too close to their camps. Most of the elves, however, saw that it was wisest to live under the protection of humans. And so we took the elves into our cities and tried to integrate them. We invited them into our own homes and gave them jobs as servants and farmhands. Here in Denerim, the elves even have their own quarter, governed by an elven keeper. Most have proven to be productive members of society. Still, a small segment of the elven community remains dissatisfied. These troublemakers and malcontents roam the streets causing mayhem, rebelling against authority, and making a general nuisance of themselves. From Ferelden, Folklore and History, by Sister Patrine, Chantry Scholar. So Sister Patrine has kind of the wrong side of this, although to the victors go the spoils. The Chantry wrote the history of the Red Crossing, but we'll find out in future games that's not quite as cut and dry as it seems to be. There's a lot of debate over who cast the first stone in the whole Red Crossing situation and why what happened. But we haven't gotten to that yet, so... Still, I think this part is rather funny. And so we took the elves into our cities and tried to integrate them. We invited them into our homes and gave them jobs as servants and farmhands. You basically took a bunch of wild folk from the outside who are just used to doing whatever they want, hunting, living life, and you basically put them in servant clothes and told them to abandon their gods. And then she's confused as to why they're a little upset. That is not how you govern folk that you are trying to bring into the fold. That just doesn't work. You can't integrate like that. It's not effective in real life or in this bow universe. Alienage Culture. There have always been alienages. They have been around for as long as elves and shems have lived in the same lands. Ours isn't even the worst. They say that Val Ryo has 10,000 elves living in a space no bigger than Denerim's market. Their walls are supposedly so high that daylight doesn't reach the Venadal until midday. But don't be so anxious to start tearing down... Don't be so anxious to start tearing down the walls and picking fights with the guards. They keep out more than they keep in. We don't have to live here, you know. Sometimes the family gets a good break, and they buy a house in the docks or the outskirts of town. If they're lucky, they come back to the alienage after the looters have burned their house down. The unlucky ones just go to the pauper's field. Here, we're among family. We look out for each other. Here, we do what we can to remember the old ways. The Fladiers who have gone out there, they're stuck. They'll never be human, and they've gone and thrown away being Elven too. So where does that leave them? Nowhere. Zarathia, Harren of the Highever alienage. So this is in the Kuzlan's alienage, and I would hope that the Kuzlan's alienage is quite good conditionally, but we've never seen it, so I'm not sure. And obviously we can't accept this as proof of that because they have a very, I mean, they literally said if they're lucky, they even come home after they burn the house down, so. The Carta. The castless dwarves of Orzammar have few prospects, consigned to live in a crumbling ruin on the social and economic fringes of the mighty dwarven capital. Most resort to begging, prostitution, or crime. Just as all rivers eventually join the sea, all castless who turn to crime eventually become part of the Carta. The hero of Ferelden decimated the ranks of this ancient gang, while rallying the dwarves to join in the battle against the archdemon Urthemiel. Unable to recover the power they once had in Orzammar, they turned their attention topside, using groups of surface-dwelling dwarves to smuggle weapons, lyrium, surface luxuries, people, and other goods between Orzammar and human lands. Despite the flow of business, its members are still desperate and violent. With no strong leader to rein in their excesses, they have little sense of dwarven honor, and freely break their word, double-cross allies, and renege on deals. From The Stone and Her Children, Dwarves of the Dragon Age, by Brother Genetive. Well, dwarves, I would imagine, do have some sense of honor, but their sense of honor is not the same as topside sense of honor, and you can tell that by the way that this is worded. You know, they have little sense of honor, freely break their word, double-cross allies, and renege on deals. This is not a surface dwarf or a Carta thing. This is a dwarven thing. That's how dwarven politics work. Look at Prince Balin. Look at all the people of the court that were on his side during all that. Like, dwarves settle things in honor provings sometimes, but a lot of times there'll be a poison somewhere, a stab in the back somewhere. I mean, shit. In the dwarven origin, you can literally get you a second to go assassinate somebody else's prince because he looked at you wrong and he's of a lower standing. So this whole backstabbing allies things being specific to the Carta is not the way that it works. Deathroot. Deathroot has been used in magic and potion making for centuries. It's a fragile-looking plant with a thin stalk and purple flowers, which fruits once a year, developing bright red fleshy pods that cause disorientation and dizziness if ingested. There are two varieties. The more common, Arcanus Deathroot, was first found by Archon Hydranius when he discovered it growing on several dead slaves. The other, Lunatic's Deathroot, is most closely associated with the story of the courtesan Melusine, who sought revenge on a powerful magister and his family. She harvested the plant, baked it into small pies for the magister's banquet, and presented them to the magister at a banquet. All the guests were seized by terrifying hallucinations after eating the pies, and tore each other to pieces. An excerpt from the Botanical Compendium by Ainz Arcania, botanist, and I believe Ainz is the one from Dragon Age Awakening, yes? The one that we went to for a win? Pretty sure that's Ainz. Spindleweed. It is an old country saying that spindleweed grows best for the sorrowful. Verdant spindleweed in a household's garden has often brought neighbors offering consolation, usually without even asking what might be wrong. This originates from the plant's use as a seasoning for dishes meant to speed the recovery of the infirm. A person who grows much of it is likely caring for the fatally ill. An excerpt from the Botanical Compendium by Ainz Arcania, botanist. And this is where the magic happens. The Grey Wardens. The first blight had already raged for 90 years. The world was in chaos. A god had risen, twisted and corrupted. The remaining gods of Tevinter were silent, withdrawn. What writing we have recovered from those times is filled with despair, for everyone believed, from the greatest archons to the lowliest slaves, that the world was coming to an end. At Weisshaupt Fortress in the desolate Anderfels, a meeting transpired. Soldiers of the Imperium, seasoned veterans who had known nothing their entire lifetimes except hopeless war, came together. When they left Weisshaupt, they had renounced their oaths to the Imperium. They were soldiers no longer. They were the Grey Wardens. The Wardens began an aggressive campaign against the Blight, striking back against the Darkspawn, reclaiming lands given up for lost. The Blight was far from over, but their victories brought notice, and soon they received aid from every nation in Thedas. They grew in number as well as reputation. Finally, in the year 992 of the Tevinter Imperium, upon the Silent Plains, they met the archdemon Dumont in battle. A third of all the armies of northern Thedas were lost to the fighting, but Dumont fell, and the Darkspawn fled back underground. Even that was not the end. The Imperium once revered 7 gods: Dumont, Zazakel, Toth, Andorel, Razakael, Lusicon, and Earthamil. 4 have risen as archdemons. The Grey Wardens have kept watch through the ages, well aware that peace is fleeting, and that their war continues until the last of the dragon gods is gone. From Ferelden Folklore and History, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. And if we go, of course, all the way to the end of the Dragon Age universe, Earthamil is the one that our hero of Ferelden killed, and then it was Razakael and Lusicon. They die in Dragon Age the Veilguard. So this is all done now, in terms of up-to-date Dragon Age universe. History of the Circle. It is a truth universally acknowledged that nothing is more successful at inspiring a person to mischief as being told not to do something. Unfortunately, the Chantry of the Divine Age had some trouble with obvious truths, although it did not outlaw magic. Quite the contrary, as the Chantry relied upon magic to kindle the eternal flame which burns in every brazier in every Chantry. It relegated mages to lighting candles and lamps, and perhaps occasional dusting of rafters and eaves. I will give my readers a moment to contemplate how well such a role satisfied the mages of the time. Of course not, they all think they're destined for more. It surprised absolutely no one when the mages of Val Rayo, in protest, snuffed the sacred flames of the cathedral and barricaded themselves inside the choir loft. No one, that is, but Divine Ambrosia II, was outraged and attempted to order an exalted march upon her own cathedral. Even her most devout Templars discouraged that idea. For 21 days, the fires remained unlit while negotiations were conducted. Legend tells us by shouting back and forth from the loft. The mages went cheerily into exile in a remote fortress outside of the capital, where they would be kept under the watchful eye of the Templars and the council of their own elder magi. Outside of normal society, and outside of the Chantry, the mages would form their own close society, the Circle, separated for the first time in human history. From Of Fires, Circles, and Templars, A History of Magic in the Chantry, by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. And this is something that I always come back to when people talk about the Circle of Magi and the Mage Plight, is they voted for this. They rebelled and held things hostage until they got the Circles. They wanted that. They voted for it, they built it, they established the system. That's literally all on the mages. They made their own chains, and then now they rebel against them. Maleficarum. It has been asked, what are Maleficarum? How shall we know them? I have been as troubled by this question as you. You have come to me for the wisdom of the Maker, but none have seen the Maker's heart save beloved Andraste, and so I have done as all mortals must, and looked to the words of his prophet for answers, and there I found respite from a troubled mind. For she has said to us, magic exists to serve man, and never to rule over him. Therefore, I say to you, they who work magic which dominates the minds and hearts of others, they have transgressed the Maker's law. Also, Our Lady said to us, those who bring harm without provocation to the least of his children are hated and accursed by the Maker. And so it is made clear to me, as it should be to us all, that magic which fuels itself by harming others, by the letting of blood, is hated by the Maker. Those mages who honor the Maker and keep his laws, we welcome as our brothers and sisters. Those who reject the laws of the Maker and the words of his prophet, are apostate. They shall be cast out and given no place among us. From the sermons of Justinian I. We have been going for around 30 minutes, so I think I will read one more and then we'll head on into something else. So let's do Might of Sten. This heavy Kunari sword is exquisitely balanced. Although no nicks mar the edge, the bloodstains on the leather grip suggest that it has seen its share of battle. Oh, these are items. Seeker's Bulwark. Emblazoned with the symbols of the Chantry Templars and greatly scarred from use, this large iron shield bears an unseen weight. It has been warded against magic to better protect the Seekers who wield it in the pursuit of apostate mages. Okay, so we'll do Apostates Courage, but we don't need to read the items. Among the Magi, some still whisper of Caleth the Renegade. Seeking freedom from beneath the Templar's heel, he fled the Chantry with a cabal of his most loyal acolytes. They reached the mountains before the winter squalls, and lived there as free men for one glorious season. The spring thaws brought a vast mercenary army, however, paid for and led by the Templar Order. Wanting to avoid bloodshed, Caleth and his acolytes surrendered peacefully and allowed themselves to be made tranquil. Which is insane, by the way. I would much rather go down swinging and fighting than to do any of that. Andraste and Nude repose, invisible. Can stone lie with purpose? Can it beckon with raw feminine command, yet shine with an inspiring virtue? That challenge was posed to sculptor Arwan de Glace, artisan and son of Empress Voin of Orlais. It was busy work and rhetoric in a time of excess, but answer he did, with the reserves of a nation and a passion unhealthy. His subject, Our Lady, though not as depicted in traditional statuary. Arwen's mad ambition summoned the form of Andraste, uninterrupted by the trappings of war and devoid of the vestments she assumed after death. It was living, commanding, obscene yet inspired. To gaze upon it was to be enthralled, spiritually and physically. It was the latter that alarmed Chantry officials. They blanched at the thought of Our Lady being possessed of such a base appeal, even as they too were drawn. The work could not be destroyed without threatening the balance between Empire and Hallowed, so a grave censorship was enacted under the guise of honoring. Enchanters were tasked with extending the ethereal that hides the fade, drawing it around the form like a cloak. Our Lady remains in the stone and in this world, but mortal eyes are forever denied her treasure and glory. She is veiled in every sense. As in all things, unintended consequences must vex those with pure intentions. Modesty would have been better served by a thickened sheet, drawn back when techniques were to be studied. As it is, the sculptor's skills are accessible only to an exploring touch, defining the shape by intimate caress. All manner of strange congress has stemmed from tempted hands and the innocent wish for clarity. From art and shame, forbidden wonders of faith, by Foisine de Petitforet, translated by Philium, a bard. So basically, they tried to hide Andraste so people couldn't see her naked, and because of that, the only way to now check the artistry and learn how to sculpt like that is to fondle her. That's kind of funny in an ironic way. Alright, that will be the end of this Codex episode. I will save the rest for next time, and we'll wrap it up and put it all together in a bigger episode. So, thank you for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, leave a like and a comment. If you like what I do here, you want to support the cause, then please do check out my Patreon in the description below. Otherwise, stay tuned, and I'll see you soon with more Dragon Age 2. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Peace.